We negate that the deployment of anti-missile systems is in South Korea's best interest. Our sole contention is cyclical aggression. Rosen of UCLA writes in 2017 that North Korea's highest priority is survival, which requires deterring threats from South Korea and the United States. In order to realize this deterrence, North Korea must be able to strike both of those countries in the event of an invasion. Kim Jong-un sees this as the non-negotiable safeguard against suffering the same fate as Muammar Gaddafi in Libya and Saddam Hussein in Iraq, both of whom gave up their nukes only to be toppled by the US afterwards. Thus, Rosen concludes that until North Korea has a credible nuclear deterrent, they will continue to develop and test missiles in order to compensate. This is empirically proven by Bermudez of Johns Hopkins University, who writes in 2015 that it was only after seeing what happened to Gaddafi and Hussein that North Korea seriously committed to accelerating its nuclear and missile program. Thus, allowing North Korea to feel safe with a deterrent is the best way to reduce aggression. Unfortunately, Etzioni of George Washington University finds in 2017 that anti-missile systems make North Korea worried their nuclear deterrent has lost its effectiveness because it makes him question if his missiles will be able to hit. This increases North Korean aggression in two key ways. First, finding ways to bypass defense. Chelani of the Center for Policy Research writes in 2017 that anti-missile systems push North Korea to develop and test new kinds of missiles designed to bypass defenses. Already, Scarborough of the Washington Times finds in 2017 that North Korea has tested 3 new types of missiles specifically designed to subvert missile defense. Second, overcompensating. In order to make up for the loss of nuclear deterrence, North Korea is becoming more aggressive to show the world that it is still a serious threat. McKeon of George Washington University writes in 2017 that in reaction to missile defense, Pyongyang has escalated its missile testing to unprecedented levels, showing Kim's efforts to deter with threats have increased considerably. The Institute for Security and Development Policy continues in 2016 that less than a week after the deployment of missile defense, North Korea ramped up its aggression by firing 5 missiles, and even more in the following months. Overall, missile defense creates dangerous cycles of aggression and escalation. Talker of Defense 1 summarized in 2017 that as North Korea increases its aggression in response to missile defense, South Korea will feel pressured to deploy even more anti-missile systems as provocations become unacceptably high. The result is a never-ending cycle of missile tests and missile defense. Missile expert Vladimir Kristov concludes in 2017 that while North Korea has no inherent need to develop advanced missiles like that of the United States, anti-missile systems force Pyongyang to continually build and test new advanced missiles. The impact of the cycle of aggression is a war by miscalculation. Miscalculation, or the perceptual misjudgment of one country by another, has increasingly been the spark for wars. In fact, Lindley of the University of Notre Dame empirically finds that since 1945, a majority of wars have been started by miscalculation. For example, the Gulf War happened because of Iraq's misjudgment of American resolve, and even the Korean War itself escalated because the United States misjudged China's commitment to the North. In the context of North Korea, because anti-missile systems increase missile tests, they increase the chance of miscalculation. Indeed, Williams of ABC reports in 2017 that every single missile test raises tensions on the peninsula and increases the risk of an accidental war. In fact, countries like South Korea and the United States are already considering aggressive action against the North. Osnos of the New Yorker continues in 2017 that hostility with North Korea has reached a level not seen since the Korean War. But even worse, Kazianis of the National Interest finds in 2016 that with more missile tests, there's always the possibility of an accidental crash landing in South Korea or Japan, which would quickly escalate into war. Thus, Lee of Bond University summarizes in 2016 that the deployment of anti-missile systems places the peninsula at a high risk of a war that would wipe South Korea off the map. In fact, Flights of the Center for Security Policy concludes in 2017 that if the cycle of exponentially increasing North Korean aggression is not broken, a war by miscalculation will be inevitable, and the spiral of aggression and negate.
Everyone's good? The Rationality, our only contention is about insulating South Korea. As Zach Bishop of Vox explains, North Korea's strategy for survival relies on threatening the US and South Korea into restraint via direct provocation. Unfortunately, the fundamental instability of the regime means miscalculation on either side is imminent. Following 22 ballistic missile tests in 2017 and a hydrogen bomb detonation last month, the risk of war is at an all-time high for 2 reasons, and the first is a preemptive strike. Absent missile defenses, Bruce Klinger of the Heritage Foundation explains that countries like South Korea and Japan will be entirely reliant on escalatory methods like preemptive strikes to protect themselves. Indeed, President Moon confirmed he would use a preemptive strike in the event of a possible nuclear attack, while Japan has recently made moves undermining its pacifist constitution to move towards remilitarization. Even worse, William Arkin of NBC reports that the U.S. is prepared to launch a preemptive strike with conventional weapons against North Korea should officials become convinced that North Korea has tested a successful ICBM. When major cities like Los Angeles are at risk, a first strike is likely. Unfortunately, the crisis group finds that the U.S. and its partners have massive intelligence vulnerabilities when it comes to North Korea. As North Korean missile tests increase tensions, the chance of a miscalculation skyrockets. This is critical because Michael Gordon of the New York Times clarifies last month, following the most precise preemptive strike, it is highly likely that Kim would retaliate and attempt to actively disarm the enemy, creating an unstoppable spiral of violence. The second way is a use it or lose it response. As Bonnie Berkowitz of the Washington Post explains, even if countries like the U.S. do not preemptively strike, actions such as the U.S.'s antagonistic rhetoric and live-fire military drills near the border could convince Kim that such a strike is coming and trigger a North Korean response. Kyle Mizukami of the National Interest confirms that in the case of an imminent Western attack, North Korea has calculated that its only chance for survival is to launch the first strike. Targeting U.S. military bases in South Korea with ballistic missiles would limit the capacity for invasion and buy the regime time, whereas doing nothing would guarantee annihilation. For these two reasons, Olivia Xi, 17 of the HR Research Center, estimates that chance of war breaking out on the Korean Peninsula in any given year is at least 20%. This is just the beginning, as Ina Feifeld of the Washington Post writes that by 2018, North Korea will deploy its first fully operational ICBM upon addressing some final challenges, such as creating effective re-entry vehicles. This means that in the very near future, North Korea will cross America's final red line. As this date approaches, the chance of conflict increases exponentially, which is why Mizukami concludes, quote, that a war has become inevitable. 3 anti-missile systems would insulate millions of South Korean people from violence, and the first is Patriot missile systems. Since acquiring Patriot in 2006, South Korea has upgraded its system numerous times. Alex Humble of White finds that 2016 Patriot missiles are now 100% successful in extensive combat testing and have double the strike range as before. Second, Aegis missiles. Brad Lennon of CNN writes that U.S. Navy ships near Seoul are equipped with Aegis missile defense that can drive 100 missiles simultaneously and fire interceptors to take out an enemy's ballistic projectile. Third, the THAAD system. That is the most advanced system yet, as Klinger confirms its radar is 10 times more powerful than any of its predecessors. Michelle Nichols of Reuters adds that has a 100% success rate in tests run by the U.S. military, can distinguish between real and decoy warheads. Importantly, while none of these systems are perfect on their own, they're nearly perfect when unified together. Chris Wolf of PRI explains that missile defense systems in South Korea are part of a layered system all connected to the same network, allowing for coordination. As each system fills each other's gaps, Philip Cole of the Hill writes that in the most complex recent test by the DoD, that cooperated with Patriot and Aegis to shoot down every missile fired at it. With 3 layers of protection, Michael Elman of 38 North quantifies that in the most probable North Korean attack, there is a 90% chance not a single missile lands, and thus we affirm.
Alright. In very general terms, why would the US and South Korea be inclined to preemptively strike the US?
Because they don't have a security clearance without missile defense.
So basically, why? So you agree that the reason the US and South Korea would ever want to preemptively strike the North is because they're afraid of a North Korean threat.
Okay, so what I'm telling you is, without missile defense, the U.S. has a need to compensate because it uses its security alliance in the region.
Okay, right.
Because
But the
of that,
reason they feel they need to compensate is because they're afraid of North Korea being aggressive,
Okay,
right?
so here's what's really critical. I'm about to explain to you what I'm saying, right? The only ever instance of a preemptive strike by a military action has been with Israel and Iran. What's important to note is that before Israel had the Iron Dome, they launched a preemptive strike against Iran because they were developing nuclear technology.
Okay,
but post Iron Dome, they stopped their aggressive attacks and saw. The point is, if you're insecure, you're attacked. If you're secure with missile defense, you don't attack.
Right. So
Can I
the
take a
reason
question?
that the U.S. or South Korea would ever preemptively attack is because they feel insecure
Yes.
because they're threatened by North Korea.
Yes.
Do you have a question? Okay,
That's
good.
exactly what I was
So
saying.
if we can show that that North Korean aggression goes way down, then do we win the internal link into preemptive strikes?
I mean, if we win the test go up, we win the debate. That's your case. I mean,
If you win, then okay, yeah, cool.
It's just,
Yeah, do you have a question?
sure. Yeah. So your first contention about like a cyclical cycle.
Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of reasons why North Korea is very mad at the U.S., such as like their actions against Gaddafi. Doesn't that not need your entire case? Because even if we take out missile defense, they still have those examples.
Here's what the Bermudas evidence proves. North Korea only got serious about its nuclear missile program after they saw what happened to Gaddafi and Hussein. What happened in those situations was the U.S. got Gaddafi and Hussein to denuclearize, take away the nuclear deterrent, and then the U.S. toppled them. What North Korea saw is that, crap, we need a nuclear deterrent so we can prevent the U.S. from invading us. That's the only reason that they are really serious about their missile defense programs.
Hey,
we're saying that anti-missile systems undermine the nuclear deterrent because it makes North Korea not confident that they will have the deterrent.
First off, that's a bad word. You said crap. But second off, I would argue.
I'm really sorry.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. It's a joke. Second off, I would argue that now that they're seeing those actions by the Middle East, their calculus has been set, and their calculus is final, which is what your part concludes, by the way. So taking in our missile defense is not changing.
The only thing that card proves is that the main incentive for North Korea to have a nuclear weapons program
examples in the Middle East
is so that they can have a deterrent. The thing is, and what our Rosen evidence says, which is really key here, is that once North Korea feels like they have this deterrent, once they feel like they can deter a U.S. attack, then they feel no need to keep developing and
you're
testing
just
new
proving my
missiles.
point. When the U.S. tries to do something like taking out missile defense, North Korea still thinks their regime is going to be toppled by the U.S. Therefore, they do the same actions.
North Korea is confident that they can destroy a major American and South Korean city with a nuclear bomb. Then they know that the U.S. won't invade them because there's no way the U.S. is going to trade San Francisco for Seoul.
Okay, that's fine. Develop.
Give me two overviews of that case. Everybody ready? The first overview is that reducing the probability of war is more important than making a war slightly less painful. According to Lee from our case, even with missile defense, a war would wipe South Korea off the map because of the North Korea's extensive conventional arsenal, artillery, biological, and chemical weapons. Second, cyclical aggression is the most important impact for two reasons. One, it's the root cause of all impact. They concede in First Cross that the only reason why we're considering these preemptive strikes in the first place is because North Korea is aggressive. But second, Flight from case says that a war by miscalculation is inevitable if we don't break this cycle of aggression. That means any reduction in North Korea's aggression constitutes a negative battle. Even still, let's go to the first contention which talks about insulating South Korea. They use this vocab analysis saying that North Korea is always going to be aggressive and the strategy is only unstable. But they miss the key part here. Bermudas from our case finds that North Korea only wants safety. They only want to deter. This is empirically proven because Bermudas finds that they only seriously develop nuclear weapons after they felt threatened by U.S. aggression against Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. The big problem here is the Rosen evidence from our case says so long as we don't let North Korea get a nuclear deterrent, they will always be aggressive because they always have to test more and more missiles. Our advocacy is to remove anti-missile systems so North Korea no longer feels like their deterrent is under threat and they no longer have to be aggressive. But then they say that we have 22 missile tests and that's really bad. The crucial evidence from our case indicates that the reason why North Korea is testing those missiles is to bypass anti-missile systems right now. We solve the root cause. But then on preemptive strikes, they concede in crossfire that the internal link is North Korean aggression. That means if we solve that, we solve the problem. But then on South Korean preemptive strikes, turn it because AMS increases the probability of South Korean striking first. Gomez and the Canadian Institute finds in 2015 that the deployment of anti-missile systems incentivizes South Korea to take a first strike because it makes their leaders feel more secure about being able to defend against any North Korean retaliation. In fact, this is proven empirically by Samuel of the New York Times, who finds that it was only after North Korea got super aggressive that South Korea started even considering and developing their preemptive strike capabilities. But then, on this idea of a U.S. preemptive strike, it's not likely at all because Lennon of CNN finds in 2017 that American threats of preemptive strikes are just posturing and aren't at all serious. This is proven in the real world insofar as if the U.S. were actually considering a strike, it would take months to move military assets near Korea, and it would take even longer to pull out the 200,000 civilians we have in the region, but that hasn't happened. But second, the U.S. won't do it because China checks. Cordman of the CSIS found in 2013 that the U.S. is significantly limited in taking preemptive strikes because they don't want to fear Chinese retaliation. But third, turn it against them because Mulaney of the New York Times finds in 2017 that anti-missile systems embolden the United States to launch a preemptive strike because they think that they're in a better position to to defend against any retaliation. But then they give us analysis about lose it or use it. They say that exercises and like live fire drills make North Korea put North Korea in a use it or lose it mentality. This makes no sense. We've had live fire drills for the past 7 decades. We say the only thing that scares North Korea uniquely is when they don't feel like their deterrent is being credible anymore. But second, Gomez of the Cato Institute turns it again because North Korea sees anti-missile systems as increasing the capacity for the U.S. to strike first. Thus, he concludes that anti-missile systems are actually the thing that put North Korea's leaders into a use it or lose it. But let's go down to their solvency. Group it all together. Min Jong in the Asian Forum reports in 2017 that North Korea has already developed the technology to launch missiles without being detected by any of their radar systems, making any missile defense completely useless. But the most important analysis here comes from Pickle, the Daily Caller in 2017, which finds that North Korea can easily overwhelm any missile defense by launching a ton of missiles in a swarm attack. But even if missile defense could shoot down every single missile, North Korea has thousands more missiles than South Korea has interceptors in their defense, so defense would run out of shots very quickly. But at the end of the day, they're going to come up here and say we're going to deploy more missile defense in the future. This is a problem because Hartman of the New York Magazine finds in 2017 that North Korea can always find flaws in missile defense faster than the U.S. can develop anti-missile systems because it only takes one hole in the armor for a missile to get through, but it takes decades for the U.S. to fix what North Korea can figure out in a few years. This is why Hartman concludes that while the earliest date to upgrade missile defense is 2030, it only takes North Korea 1 year to find a flaw in the system. But then on the idea of layered defense, remember all these reasons they tell you layered defense are good, don't assume that North Korea is going to do these sneaky tactics that we tell you about. But then finally, other element analysis about 90% effectiveness, this evidence is 100% hypothetical. It's just thinking about what would happen if layered defense was perfect, no indication of what happens in the real world whatsoever.
That's a mic drop.
No prep for either of all. That's crazy. Right?
So there's like a lot of stuff to get through. So the order is going to be, there are 2 overviews. Then our solvency, but skipping over our links, then their case. Is that cool? I'm going to be quick, but I'll try to be clear. Let's start. The first thing they tell you is that if you don't have missile defenses, North Korea will sit tight and not try to acquire more missiles. And then they read you a card from Fritz saying that like if you have the cyclical conflict continuing, then miscalculation is inevitable. We agree miscalculation is inevitable, which means that if we prove that tests continue at all in the affirmative world, then you need to have, or in the negative world, then you need to have missile defense because war is inevitable, we're the only solution. I actually went out of order. There are other overviews tests that like South Korea could be blown off the map by conventional weapons. But Ms. Okami of the National Interest explains that North Korea's conventional capabilities are not strong enough to overwhelm South Korea's. Because of this, North Korea has reserved its conventional capabilities like artillery for a second strike capability, meaning if it went into war, it would use it to defend itself, but it would need an asymmetric advantage to destroy the U.S. bases in the region. That's ballistic missiles. That means when you deploy missile defense, even the perception that it works creates a deterrence by denial effect, where North Korea would never risk that the missiles don't succeed because that guarantees their annihilation. Then, on their case. First, the biggest problem here is that they are assuming that when you take out missile defense, you remove tests from the equation. Their argument is that they will just sit on the missiles they have and deter a U.S. invasion. The problem is this isn't enough. Habib of the Pacific Review explains that North Korea does not need to just be sitting on missiles that can deter the U.S., they need to be testing them. The reason is because they need to convince the U.S. that they are irrational enough that they could create a crisis, and testing is how they do this. This is empirically proven by the fact that the U.S. intervened in Iraq even when they believed that they already had weapons of mass destruction, which means North Korea knows that even a nuclear deterrent could still lead to a U.S. intervention. This is backed up by the fact that the U.S. is increasing its live fire military drills and flying bombers over the region. They give you all these reasons why America would not preemptively strike, but the fact that America is doing things that shows like they want to preemptively strike convinces North Korea that America is bomb crazy and doesn't care about those things, which then leads them to test more. That's a non-unique reason. But then second and more importantly, the white elephant in the room is ICBMs. If their argument were true, then why is North Korea developing ICBMs which aren't even touched by the missile defense network in the region? ICBMs is that they're going to deter the U.S. That's really critical because the ICBMs are coming in early 2018. That's key because when they come, we say, hey, that the U.S. will choose as they see themselves Los Angeles over Seoul. So they will strike the ICBMs to eliminate them, but then North Korea would retaliate on South Korea, so South Korea gets caught in the crossfire, but America is fine. That's what's going to trigger the war. That's also what causes use it or lose it, not making the entire case, but then group the 2 links. There are 3 reasons why tests are lower in our world. The first of which comes from Kelly the Diplomat, which explains that missile defense creates a security assurance. Countries don't want to go overkill, so when they have protection, they don't lash out. That's why South Korea empirically decreased aggressive military investments after they got missile defense, which is critical because these aggressive investments provoke North Korea. Second, according to Daniel Pinkston, a North Korean analyst, he finds that because North Korea has other reasons to be testing, now they can scapegoat that as the reason. This is key, because he finds that removing that shows acquiescence and weakness, which then incites more testing. Empirically proven by the fact that in the 3 months where we canceled bad deployment, North Korea increased testing, developed more ICBMs, and a hydrogen bomb. If North Korea's strategy was survival, they would have decreased testing because they wouldn't have wanted the US to redeploy THAAD. But we redeployed it because tests created the threat. But then third, turn this again because the deterrence by denial, because we said that when you deploy the missile defense system, that shows North Korea that anything they do that raises the chance that a war could happen would be bad for them. Therefore, they won't do those things, which is why again tests have been lower with that. But then, they say there's going to be new technologies that circumvent that. First, Matt Morano, the diplomat, finds that no, North Korea does not beat us faster because every time we add a new missile defense system, we're adding another layer to the defense network. So it's not just finding a hole in one, they have to find holes in all three. Which is why they find that that will be upgraded to have triple the radar, 12 times the interception capability, and will be able to intercept, it's already been upgraded to intercept decoys, submarine launched ballistic missiles, and ultra-precise Scuds, which conveniently are the 3 types of new missiles that their own card talks about, and they find that the US always beats them in the race. But then second, the argument here is that North Korea is always going to be testing, so either we lose the race or we have a chance of winning the race. But then on miscal, 2 key turns. A, is that testing will always lead to miscal. When the US has missile defense, we're less likely to go and strike after a test, because even if there's a risk of them striking, that A provides defense, and B provides an early warning to US ground-based interceptors to take the missile out of the sky instead of starting a war. But then second, and more importantly, since the war is inevitable and they concede that through miscal, we're the only team with solvency. Thanks.
Oh my god. So good.
That's good. You ready? You can have the first question.
So you say North Korea needs to show it's rational, right?
North Korea needs to test because having a missile is not enough in their eyes to keep America at bay.
So what else do we need to do? Like,
So
what
saying,
else
right?
does missile test add?
Okay, so what we're saying is that just sitting on the weapons is not enough because it didn't work with Iraq, clearly the perception that they had
Wait,
weapons.
Iraq gave up their weapons, then the US intervened.
Wait, the US intervened because we believed they still had weapons of mass destruction, which
Wait,
we are
not
not
nuclear
willing to
weapons.
risk that. But WMDs could still have had the same deterrence effect.
I mean,
And our argument,
you can't
let's talk about
deliver a chemical weapon to the United States.
Russell, how about this?
Yeah.
Let's talk about your own example.
Let's do
If
it.
North Korea has ICBMs, right, you say that will keep America at bay. But if America does the preemptively strike, the concept of the strike
Not
is to
gonna
destroy.
preemptively strike.
Wait. The concept of the strike,
Not-
let me answer, is to destroy the ICBM launch pads with first strike advantage.
What's your
Then-
question? You just seem to be giving a speech on why a preemptive
Because
strike would happen.
you asked me, why would the US strike if they had these weapons? That's what you've been getting at this entire round. And I'm saying the US would strike precisely to eliminate their capability to kill us.
That's not
That
responsive
eliminates
to
their
any of the defense I already rebutted.
How is it not responsive? Give a piece of defense it doesn't respond.
Lendon says that the US is only posturing here because they haven't done anything to
Yeah.
indicate they're actually going to
Yes,
do it.
yes.
For example, this is really important. Lendon says if the US was actually serious about preemptively striking, it would take them like close to a year in advance
All right,
to pull out the 200,000 civilians in South
Listen
Korea.
for a second. In your own case, you read a card saying that missile tests create miscalculation because America will think it's the real deal and therefore will mistake it for us going to war, right?
Okay, here's the difference, right?
Yeah.
A U.S. preemptive strike by miscalculation is when you launch the missile and the U.S. thinks that's an attack and they respond. Your argument about a preemptive strike is us sitting down at the table and preparing a preemptive strike and then rolling up the tanks and rolling up the bombers and blowing up South
Russell,
Korea.
you're trying to strawman my argument. My argument is twofold. A, because these tests are still happening, specifically the acquisition of an ICBM, which is not affected by the deployment of THAAD, that creates the same incentive for what you talk about will happen to happen. B, is that because North Korea thinks that the US is not super rational itself, then North Korea is considering its own use it or lose it strike, because it could at least destroy the bases in the region
So let's
and have
talk
some
about
chance of
this like use it or lose it stuff. And let's talk about this in the context of deterrence by denial.
Yeah.
Right? So why would North Korea ever want to strike first, whether or not they have this deterrence?
Because, let me explain. The US's deterrence is collapsing right now. Because, let me explain. Because North Korea does not think that the US wants to bring its own nuclear weapons into an exchange. They think the US is, because then that would create a nuclear war for us too. They think at best
Did
America...
you just say that the US would get involved in a war before North Korea?
A conventional preemptive strike. Our argument, right, is that if they do the first strike, North Korea can destroy our capability to do that conventional preemptive strike the same way America could destroy their capability to do the ICBM.
This doesn't make any sense
If
because the majority of US military assets aren't even in South Korea. They
Yes.
can just roll them over from Guam.
Everything in the rapid reaction zone that the US would be able to react with is in range of North Korean missiles, so not just South Korea would be targeted.
Sounds good.
We're on some track. Okay, it's just going to be like extending Russell's overview and then our case. Is everyone ready? Let's begin. They say that war is inevitable, but they never neglect the flight's evidence which says that war is only inevitable if you don't break the cycle of aggression. We break the cycle because Khrushchev says that the only reason North Korea continually feels the need to test and build new missiles is because of anti-missile systems, because they feel like they've lost a nuclear deterrent and they're not safe. Then they say that North Korea can't overwhelm South Korea with their conventional weapons, so a war wouldn't destroy South Korea. But then you've got Reeves says that it's also chemical and biological weapons. That's why he concludes that South Korea will get destroyed in a war regardless of if we have anti-missile systems or not. At this point, before all impacts which actually reduce the likelihood of war breaking out in the first place, because that's what's actually important to South Korea's interest. But go on to the way that we prevent that, which is on missile testing. They say that North Korea is going to always test missiles to be perceived as irrational. Rosen says they don't need to be perceived as irrational. Actually feel like they're safe because they can deter the US with a nuclear deterrent. This is what happened in the Soviet Union, and it doesn't make sense that like North Korea would always be like aggressive and like provocative if they feel no need, but they really want security. And they say the US is doing live military drills anyway. North Korea doesn't care about this because the drills don't actually affect their nuclear deterrent. That's the only way that they can feel safe and the way to stop aggression. This is empirically proven by Bermudez, who says that North Korea never even cared about nuclear missiles until they feared the threat of US invasion. The way that they like solve that is by having a nuclear deterrent. McKeon says that specifically anti-missile systems cause an unprecedentedly high rate of missile testing among North Korea, and because they feel the need to get around these missile systems to restore their deterrent. Then they say that like North Korea is developing ICBMs, which could deter anyway. But North Korea wants to deter like the US and South Korea. When you have anti-missile systems, it means that the ICBMs are less likely to be able to hit the US or South Korea. Perceptually, they feel like they can't deter the US. Then they talk about like deterrence by denial. But North Korea doesn't have any reason to fight at all without anti-missile systems, and that's because Rosen says that their primary motive is security. But they really don't want war, so without anti-missile systems, you don't even need to worry about that. Then extend the Hartman evidence, which says that even if South Korea, even if the missile systems work in the status quo, North Korea can always develop them faster, and Min Jong says that they've already been able to do this, so they really have no solvency. At this point, since McKeon says that anti-missile systems specifically cause the highest rate of missile testing ever, and Flight says that war is inevitable in the status quo, we're the only team that has a chance of reducing the probability of war, which is the only impact that matters.
Alright. Can I just see the Ming Zhang evidence, right, about how the missiles can circumvent it? It's just one sentence, but it's citing like the study. Do you have the study or just the sentence?
I have the
Okay, so then can I see that part? Yeah, we'll keep running quick.
It was 142 years.
There you go.
Everybody's good? So it's going to start on their case, move to our case. On their case, they say that if North Korea feels safe, they have no safe. There are two problems with this. The first is that North Korea never feels safe. The warrant speaking for this is because drills and live fire exercises really cause them to have fear. They just say, oh, this does not show the U.S. is actually aggressing. Well, what they don't understand is that military exercises are the biggest factor in North Korea's eyes that the U.S. is preparing for an invasion. That's why the Berkowitz analysis from case that big drop tells you that North Korea would strike the United States bases in South Korea as a sign of aggression. It's still not using their case. The second thing they say is that, oh, missile defense would stop ICBMs, so our impact doesn't apply. Well, we tell you that missile defense only protects South Korea. It does not protect the United States, so our impacts are still unique. This frontlines our case and response to them. Three terms they drop. The first is security assurance. We tell you specifically from the Kelly Cause that missile defense is a security assurance for countries in the region like South Korea, Japan, and the United States. That leads to a decreased tensions on the whole. With that said, that's the only thing breaking the cycle. Second, they drop the term that North Korea would use that as a scapegoat for their actions. The reason why this is so important is because it's empirically true. We tell you that the 3 months without that in 2017, we had an increase in missile tests compared to the entire 2017. Why is this important? Because that means that the cycle continues and not only escalates in their wars. That means war is inevitable. This is a link to war impacts. We don't even need our case to win today's debate. The third thing we drop is deterrence by denial. We say that North Korea's only asymmetric advantage is ballistic missiles because artillery has to be a second strike capability. When you take that away, North Korea's calculation changes, and that means they don't strike. More specifically on our case, a couple of things. First, remember, we don't need our links to offline them anyways. They just say, oh, we've had drills, so it doesn't make sense. That's our point. Because of the drills, North Korea sees that as U.S. aggression and imperialism. That's the root cause. But second, the example with the U.S. and Iraq, we saw that they had WMDs, yet we still attacked in the first place. This only empirically proves us. On solvency, a couple of things. One, they just say radars are really screwed up. Their card says another card that's actually already software. The Morano card that defection well says that that's upgraded by 12 times, solved back for this radar. But second, they just say, oh, North Korea can swarm. But we tell you from 38 north, that North Korea can only launch 30 to maximum 50 missiles at a time. Asia can do 100, that can do 80, that's 180 right there with Patriot another 30. We saw back. And they say, oh, North Korea would just find other reasons. But then they don't respond to the fact that North Korea would have to circumvent all 3 missile defenses. It's not good enough to find a hole in one. Finally, the Ellen card, call for the card, it's based on empirical tests. Because of this, we have a 90% chance that a single missile land, full solvency. Even if you don't find that, one missile blocks 340,000 blocks. Partial solvency still wins the debate. Thank you.
Okay. If the U.S. has had military drills in South Korea for 70 years, why hasn't North Korea attacked them?
Let me ask you a question. If North Korea has had missile tests for 70 years, why isn't the U.S.
Because
attacking?
the rate of missile tests before anti-missile systems was like very, very low.
And
So
because the rate of military drills in the past has been comparatively low. Both of us have answered the same question. Aggression on both sides is increasing, so miscalculations.
So you're saying that like true, like the
The
number
same way
of
that more tests increase the chance of war, more drills increase the chance
Here's
of
the
war.
difference.
Drills are our version of
why
tests.
why does North Korea care about military drills in South Korea?
Because
like,
military
how does
drills
that actually
are the
affect
pretext
safety?
for a conventional
But
invasion.
why
And we
does
say-
North Korea think a conventional invasion matters if they
Also-
feel like they're safe with their nuclear
Also, wait,
deterrent?
wait,
Okay,
These are our
guys,
Even
this
if
is
you
where we're going to
buy-
turn your case against you because we tell you that the U.S. would use a conventional invasion to take out their ICBM launch pads, empirically proven by all the invasions you guys talk about, and the Iraq invasion, where we conventionally intervened because of WMDs.
Iraq could not hurt the United States with a WMD. In comparison,
Wait.
hold on.
They
Can I please talk for more than like 10 seconds?
Yeah.
In comparison, if the U.S. were to attack North Korea, and North Korea would both A, be able to hurt the U.S. citizens in the U.S., but B, most importantly, they'd be able to hurt the 200,000 U.S. citizens living in South Korea. This is the difference between Iraq and South Korea.
Two things, right? Number one, you say Iraq would not have been able to hurt us, but we thought they could, right? That's why we went to war, because of the anthrax that was presented to the UN, or the thought that they had those weapons of mass destruction. Number two, more importantly, Russell, here's the key thing. If they can really hurt us, that's exactly why we do the preemptive strike, because we take away their ability. In international realism, mutually assured destruction is broken by the concept of a first strike advantage. If you take away the retaliatory capability, you can win the war.
I'm glad you're making these extensions in Grand Crossfire, but
it was all in
This is literally the 3 turns on your case that you dropped.
You literally dropped
This is
2
the
pieces
exact
of terminal
word.
defense on preemptive strikes and deterrent on.
Because we use cyclical
You
violence
guys
to
read
reach
our card,
target.
which says that if cyclical violence continues, war is inevitable. So all we have to do is prove A, it continues, and B, it gets worse without THAAD. Thus, THAAD is the only risk we have at solvency. That's our link, that's what we're going for. But more importantly, right, you guys say, wait, you guys were just asking me questions, which is fine. So you guys say that like, oh, it's not just conventional artillery, it's chemical and biological weapons as well, right? Okay, so aside from the fact that our card is taking that into account, chemical and biological weapons, they need to be mounted on something, right?
They're mounted in artillery.
Right. So if they're mounted on artillery and they launch the artillery, that leaves them defenseless because artillery is how they protect against an invasion, correct?
Yeah, that's our point. That's why we have to stop them.
No, our argument is that they need the artillery to protect themselves.
In a war, like the fact that a war is occurring on the peninsula means that like probably millions of people are gonna die. The best thing to do is just like stop the war.
Stop people from dying.
Exactly. We tell you that because they need to protect themselves, ballistic missiles are their advantage. Would you guys be so kind as to give me an extra piece of paper? I kind of ran out of space.
Oh yeah,
Thank you.
Happens to the best of us. What?
Alright. Our arguments, their arguments. Everybody ready? They drop the flight's analysis in summary, but they really don't engage with the underlying word. Flight says, if we don't break the cycle of exponentially increasing aggression, then a war by miscalculation is inevitable. This means 2 things. 1, it is try or die for the negative to reduce the chance of war, but 2, even if you believe all of their terms that the probability of war goes up without anti-missile systems, it does not matter because the war is already inevitable. The only reason solving it is voting negative. But even more so, they drop the Lee analysis which says that South Korea would be wiped off the map, even if we have missile defense that means any reduction in the probability of the war constitutes a negative bout. On our case, they drop the Rosen evidence, which says that North Korea only wants security. In fact, what Rosen says is once they feel good about their nuclear turn and feel good about their security, they will no longer have to be as irrational and as aggressive. This solves the biggest internal link into North Korean aggression around. And we tell you this is empirically proven from the Bermuda's evidence, which finds that the only time that North Korea was serious about its nuclear program was after it felt threatened by the United States. We tell you this threat uniquely comes now through the deployment of anti-missile systems because McEwen says it undermines our perceptual deterrent, which is why McEwen finds on net tests have gone unprecedented levels after the deployment of anti-missile systems. Maybe they give you a blip saying in a few months of time frame it may have gone up without anti-missile systems, but we tell you from McEwen that on net it's unprecedented specifically because of anti-missile systems. Then they give you a whole bunch of terms on like drills and like security assurances and deterrent by denial, group all of them together. None of them matter because none of them hurt North Korea's nuclear deterrent. The only thing that threatens North Korea's nuclear deterrent and their ability to deter an invasion in their mind is the deployment of anti-missile systems. This means we link into the flight analysis which says that we have to break the cycle of aggression and we have to reduce these anti-missile systems in order to make this war not inevitable. But, defense on their case, they drop the Min-Jong analysis which says that the radar systems literally don't have the ability to detect North Korean launches right now. They say we've upgraded the radar range, fine, that doesn't change the radar ability. But second, they drop the most important analysis in the round, which is Hartman, which says that North Korea can always outpace South Korea in deployment of anti-missile systems. It takes North Korea 1 year to figure out a hole in a system that it takes the United States 2 decades to build. This means that in the end of the day, they don't save any lives. The only risk of offense comes from the negative.
Alright, we have 18 seconds, right? So we gotta use that. Actually, no. We're only going to use 8.
Exactly all that.
So the order is going to be the cycle, whether they solve, whether we solve. Doing good? I'll sign first. Let's start. We drop the flights analysis? No, we don't. Flights is a link into our case. Flight says that if the cycle continues, then war is inevitable. There are 2 ways you can solve. Either A, you blunt the inevitable war with missile defense, or B, you try to break the cycle, but we tell you that the cycle will not break. They say South Korea would be wiped off the map regardless of a war. The national interest tells you that the conventional capabilities, including the chemical biological weapons, which are mounted on artillery, are needed as a second strike defensive capability. So, North Korea's asymmetric advantage would be to strike the ballistic missiles onto the US military bases and destroy our capacity for retaliation. If you put in missile defense A, that protects them, and B, it creates some kind of deterrence by denial effect where they're no longer likely to go into war because, again, they cannot succeed, and if they fail, they are annihilated then. They read you Rosen and Bermuda saying that if we take out missile defense, they'll sit tight on the missiles they have now, circumventing this with 2 responses. 1, the Habib card that gets cold drop, which tells you that test is how they create deterrence, not just having the missiles. Because A, when we have military drills, it shows despite the missiles that they have, we're still gearing up for an invasion because we would conventionally invade to take out those missiles, and B, the Iraq example is really clear. When we had WMPs in the region, we still took the risk because we were thinking that we could stop the ICBMs, we could stop the WMPs, but then South Korea still gets caught in the crossfire. So again, tests continue. But second, we tell you ICBM development continues. This is a really big problem because that means that even with that, they're developing ICBMs, so nothing is going to stop them. And ICBMs are what crosses the US's red line. This gives us their own flight analysis saying war is inevitable. They say that 3 turns don't impact the nuclear deterrent. Yes, they do. 1, if South Korea is becoming more aggressive because they have that looks South Korea is more likely to intervene and invade. Second, on acquiescence, if we pull out that, we show that we're weak and don't care about the region, which again makes that invasion less likely. And third, if we deter them by denial, then again that prevents them from ever striking because that guarantees their annihilation. There are 2 defensive responses on solvency. First, Ming Jong saying that they have new systems. The systems he talks about, SLBMs, decoys, they've all been solved already. Ishan tells you that they have to beat all 3 layers at once. That's why Murano tells you that we're always faster with the 12 times and 3 times upgrades. That's critical. Element tells you there's a 90% chance that not a single missile lands, which is key because that's the only risk of stopping the inevitable war. 1 missile stopped out of 1,000 is still a reason to vote aft. 10 missiles stopped, 100 missiles stopped, save some lives, vote aft.
So can I actually see 2 pieces of evidence?
Yeah.
The first is 3 times the upgrade that you spoke about, and then on your side, the evidence that talks about how that there's going to be constables, but they're not going to be
Yeah, I mean, the 3 times, 12 times is general. They're cold evidence, we just indicted it. Like the system they talk about. So do you want the indicts or just?
I want the index.
Okay, sure. That's just like multiple different.